We need our suffering to kind of help wake us up to say, oh, I need to progress, not just to be satisfied with just contentment, relaxation, watching Netflix. I need to have more in my life than that. So I need to learn about how to interconnect it with all beings. And our suffering kind of helps us to understand that. And we can hopefully learn to be interconnected without fighting with each other. That's the key, to be able to do it without obstruction, without conflict. The second noble truth, samudaya, is in Pali means origin. This is the aggregation of suffering here. Yes. So when the word got translated from Pali to Sanskrit, then it became, unfortunately, they put in an extra accent. They made it samudaya, which means to aggregate, which to build up, make a big heap of something. Well, that kind of makes sense too. And then the Chinese translated it in that way too, the aggregation. And Thich Nhat Hanh said, this is like the path to ill being. So if you follow the path of ill being, you're just bringing on more suffering, not being aware of the third noble truth, the release from this. It's possible to release from suffering. And how do we release from suffering? Oh, there's a release from suffering. How do I do that? How do I become free from suffering? Well, it's the Noble Eightfold Path. So the Noble Eightfold Path is the path of well-being. Well-being, the noble path, and the ill-being, which is called the ignoble path. So I start there with my talk about his teachings. So what is this? So for people who have been in the retreat, I'm going to just give a summary of maybe you've already heard some of this from my teachers. The three highest trainings of the three disciplines. Sanchue, this is the three legs of a stool: morality and concentration and wisdom. But it's part of a cycle. That's why we can see that the Eightfold Path, wisdom, we start off with making some awareness of seeing things more clearly. Oh, I need to be able to figure out a way to decrease my suffering for myself and for others around me. I need to understand what is the right way to look at this. How do I do that? And then what is my right intention and thoughts? That's the wisdom. And then we need to have a good moral path. So we learn about our speech and our action and our livelihood. And then going deeper into concentration efforts, mindfulness and concentration, we go deeper into the practice. And that leads us to a greater understanding of right view and right intention and so on, so forth. So it's like a wheel. A good place to start the wheel, once you have some right view and right intention, which has brought you to this place, is to understand that the way in which we are interconnected to other human beings is through our words, our right speech. Where I live, there are many deer, and I have an office connected to my home, and oftentimes deer will come and they will look through the window of my psychotherapy office, and I have to say to them, excuse me, confidentiality. I have to look through the window. When they're just standing there, sometimes a patient can't come down the walkway because the big deer, Charlene, she's standing right there. When we leave, the deer's still standing there. I say, do you have insurance? No, I'm self-pay. I said, okay. So right speech, the deer, they're not upset with me or afraid. They just kind of just hang out as close as I am to you. And they just kind of hang out there, kind of the same color. Outfit, yes. And I don't try to touch them because they might have a deer tick. No, I don't want any of those. You don't have any deer ticks, do you? Good, okay. So this interconnectedness we feel, just part of the family. And so the deer may not understand my words, but they understand my voice tone. When we get to right speech, we'll talk about that. And then, of course, concentration. So all of these things are interconnected with each other. In the next slide, we can see here's another view that we can break it down even more. The right view has to do with understanding the 12 links of interdependent origination. Oh, that sounds a mouthful there. And right intention has to do with non-ill will, harmlessness, and renunciation. Wonder what that means. And right speech has to do with no lying, harsh words, slander, gossip. Right action is not harming, or killing, stealing, no sexual misconduct, and no intoxication. Right livelihood is not doing any activity that would be working with killing or stealing of firearms, intoxicants, for example. And right effort, the four right efforts of first restraining and then overcoming unwholesomeness and then training and maintaining wholesomeness. And right mindfulness, the four foundations of mindfulness, body, feeling, mind, and phenomena. And then right concentration, the development of shamatha vipassana, pamana, and going into the deeper realms of form and formless absorptions, jhana. So as you can see, this is called the eightfold path. The reason is that it unfolds. Another picture of it. So morality, we'll start with morality. Morality is a good place to start once a person has an understanding, oh, I need to make some changes. I need to be able to figure out how to be making improvement in my life. How do I do that? Well, I need to commit to understanding what's the difference between what's virtuous and non-virtuous. What's the difference between wholesome and unwholesome? So for the bodily actions, we avoid killing and avoid doing harm. We will avoid stealing and taking things that don't belong to us or not given to us freely. We avoid sexual misconduct. For the monastic celibacy. For the speech, we avoid lying. We avoid slander, abusive speech, gentle, avoid idle gossip. And of the mind, we avoid malice or ill will, avoid greediness, and avoid having the false views. A little bit more about that. This leads us to, when we get serious about this, to be able to say, oh, I want to develop this moral path, so I will undertake the training rule to abstain from killing and stealing and lying and sexual misconduct and intoxicants that cloud the mind. And once a person realizes, oh, this makes sense, and I was listening to a program about the basketball championship that was won by the Oklahoma team, Oklahoma Thunder, I think it's their name. And the team has taken a vow not to use any alcohol. So during the celebration, the sportscasters were saying it was no fun because they couldn't get anything to drink. And so they weren't popping champagne or beer or anything like that. They said, oh, this is not much fun. But then they said, well, they probably woke up the next day without a hangover. So things are changing, even in the basketball world. So this is another design. I believe that this is from Master Inchun's book, perhaps. I don't remember where I got this, but another way of seeing physical activity and verbal activity and mental activity all interconnected with each other and how it connects to the five precepts and the 10 virtues that I just showed you the chart of. And we go to the next chart. You can see that we also, in the Mahayana school, we have what are called the six paramita. Now, paramita is a funny word because it's been translated as perfection in the West, but really there is not, it doesn't mean perfection, it means perfecting. So we want to perfect these qualities. We're not saying to ourselves, I want to be perfect in this way. As soon as you say you want to be perfect in something, that separates you from your path of wanting to improve. So these six Mahayana paramita, this is generosity, morality, patience, diligence, meditation, and wisdom. Meditation, we use the word concentration there. And this is interconnected, as you can see, with the connections between morality, concentration, and wisdom. This interconnection here is something I got from Jan Lusthouse, a Yogacara scholar at Harvard. But I think it's a good interconnection. So right speech is a good place to start because that's where our interconnection happens a lot with others. How we speak to each other is very important. And so this is like a matrix. On the top, we have the four modes of restraint. We restrain ourselves from lying and from saying things that will divide people from each other and no harsh words. And then no idle chatter or gossip. Gossip would be another way of looking at that, depending on the context. And then there are these five wholesome intentions where we want to speak at the right time. And we want to speak factually and truthfully, speak gently, and speak only what is beneficial, and speak with a kind heart. So I find that these five wholesome intentions are very important to focus on because we have this tendency sometimes to not be aware of our voice tone. Sometimes we'll say things that are harmful, even though we think, oh, this person needs to hear this. But we don't do it in a way that's beneficial, and then we wonder why the other person becomes defensive. So this criticism and defensiveness, they go together. And so if we speak beneficially with a kind tone, less likely the person will feel criticized and less likely that they will feel that they have to defend themselves. This is very important in the family, where we tend to take people for granted, and I hear the way that spouses talk to each other or how they talk to their children, and I sometimes wonder, oh my, these kids are going to need therapy. So I want to go to, I'm not going to go through all of the different qualities of morality, but I want to then go to concentration. And concentration is a big topic. It starts with right effort. Having the right intention when so all of these things are interconnected with each other, having the right view and right intention with our right effort. Right effort permeates all of the other qualities of the Eightfold Path. So there are these four right efforts. First, we restrain what is unwholesome. We feel this upset within ourselves, maybe sometimes anger, and we realize this is not something I want to hurt someone with, and so I'm going to restrain myself. Or someone else gets upset with us, and we want to respond backwards, back to them. And so sometimes it's better to restrain ourselves. This happens quite a bit in life. We're going to get along with each other and feel interconnected and not obstruct each other. We need to be able to know how to restrain ourselves so that we don't cause harm, even when we feel like someone else is going to be critical of us and we have to defend ourselves. Sometimes better just to listen. And then uprooting or abandoning unwholesomeness can come next. When we learn how to restrain ourselves enough, to, oh, okay, I'm restraining myself. I'm finding a way later to be able to talk about my feelings in a way that's more beneficial and not harmful. But I want to abandon this feeling of becoming angry and hateful or responding negatively or criticizing the person back. I want to abandon that. I want to uproot it. Sometimes I use the gardening metaphor of, seeing weeds in the garden. And if you just take them from the surface, well, they'll grow back in a day or two. But if you pull them out by the root, maybe they won't come back, or maybe they won't come back as quickly. So being able to unroot this need to do that is very beneficial. And then we want to also develop what's wholesome, remembering the positive actions and good feelings that we have, and express this in the form of loving kindness and compassion toward others. Cultivating this, developing that. And then once it's cultivated and developed, we want to be able to maintain it, maintain what's wholesome. So these are the four right efforts, part of the 37 factors of enlightenment. Right mindfulness, also part of concentration. In the end, this is a very profound topic. And when we come here, many people enter the monastery here and come here to practice. They want to learn about mindfulness meditation. One of the main things that attracts people is I want to be able to calm my mind. And so the scientific definition of mindfulness by John Kabat-Zinn is mindfulness is the awareness that emerges through remembering. I added the word remembering because Kabat-Zinn doesn't put that word in there. To pay attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally to the unfolding of experience moment by moment. We want to be as present as we can on purpose, paying attention. We want to remember to bring our mind back to this moment, not to get stuck in the past or in the future. People who get stuck in the past, and particularly negativity about the past, they have a tendency toward depression, and people who get stuck in the future negatively have a tendency toward anxiety. So these three aspects of the mindfulness practice is we want to be ardent, alert, and mindful. When the Buddha gave his suggestion as to how to start meditation, he always began teaching the meditation the same way by saying, sending the awareness to the breath, ardent, alert, mindful, putting aside our wants and worries about the daily life. Always mindful, I breathe in, mindful, I breathe out. This is how the Buddha taught. So he taught about ardent means giving it your best effort. Alert means paying attention, being in the moment, and mindful means to remember to bring the mind back. So right mindfulness, the word in Chinese for mindfulness, yin is a picture. On the bottom, this is a heart. And on the top, it's a being in the present moment and has like a little hook on it. And so the heart is in the present moment. But if you unhook the heart and you put money there, you get another character, time, which means greediness. Be careful of that. Be careful what you hook your mind to in the present moment. Now, in the original teachings of the Buddha, there was no mention of a word that we would call meditation. That came later. The Buddha talked about concentration. Well, the reason perhaps he was able to do that was because as the Buddha, he could lead people from their normal everyday life into deeper levels of concentration very quickly. But we're not so fortunate. We need intermediate steps now. So we practice meditation. This is the word for meditation in Chinese, Chan. Uh, the Chan second tone, we have to do something about our sign of the Chan Hall. You'll help with, there might be a file that you can send to me and I can remake that. It has the wrong tone. If you come here, we go to the Chan Hall. This is not the right hall. So it's actually a picture. The two squares at the top are a person screaming at you. And then on the right-hand side, that's a pitchfork. So a person is chasing you around with a pitchfork. That doesn't sound very meditative. Mm-hmm. But then on the other side is the person who's able to transcend, able to overcome. Even when somebody is chasing you with a pitchfork and screaming at you, you're able to have a higher mind, calm mind. And who's usually screaming at you with a pitchfork? It's usually yourself. And that's why we want to cultivate this higher mind. So mindfulness meditation leads to concentration through the pathway of shamatha. This is the calming of the mind by focusing on the breath. So we have many teachings from the Buddha about focusing on the breath. Usually what we're practicing here when we focus on the breath is the first of the 4 sections of Anapanasati. Then the second way of practicing is called vipassana. This is cultivating insight. The insight that we're concentrating on is not just an individual insight because we're interconnected. So we want to have insight about how this interconnection works. What are the principles that hold it all together so that we understand how to put that into practice, not just for ourselves, but in our interactions with others as well. So we need to focus on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, cultivating a mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of our feeling, mindfulness of thought, mindfulness of how we interact with the world, the external world, phenomenon. And then the thirds of the teachings on cultivating concentration is the practice of appamana or brahmavihara, which is cultivating loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity. And in the Visuddhimagga, the text for Theravada Buddhism, one of the ways of entering into the higher levels of concentration, access concentration, is to practice these techniques. So you can access concentration through any of these pathways, any of these doorways, shamatha, vipassana, or appamana. Appamana means without limit. Boundless. So we want to be able to have this loving kindness, not just towards our family, ourselves, but toward all beings everywhere. In an immeasurable way. In other words, this is beyond immeasurable. Beyond, you can't measure it. It's so big, it's so much. So in the practice from the Chinese tradition of the cultivating the shamatha, this deeper state to enter in that way, a person practices these 9 abiding minds. The first 3, inward abiding, the first one is inward abiding means I realize that I can't solve the problems of the world by going out into the world all the time. I need to be able to solve inside what my reaction was to what's going on. The toilet may break and I may need to find a plumber, but yelling at the toilet is not going to help. So I need to work on my own internal experience. And once a person realizes that and they begin to practice and they set up a daily practice, this is called continuous abiding. They abide on a regular basis in meditation in the morning or the evening, or sometimes morning and evening, depending upon their life conditions. They can sit for 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes, depending upon their family circumstances. Then they set this up in a continuous way. Then the person begins to feel the benefit of this daily practice, and they end up being able to experience what's called calm abiding. You get to calm abiding. As a layperson, this is no small achievement. This is very good. And then there are higher levels, and eventually where you would end up in concentration through this method. As you can see, concentration is quite profound. This is another picture from Master Inshun's book, but I think I'm not going to stay on this one. Talks about what gets in the way of people's practice: laziness, forgetfulness, They just get restless or they lose their energy. They just become too passive or they overdo things. So this is some of the things that can get in the way. So when we get to right concentration proper, right concentration has to do with understanding the 5 jhana factors and how to help these jhana factors dissolve. So vitaka and vichara, this internal chatter that the mind has, you notice when you sit, mind is chattering away. It starts with vitaka, it just begins, and then it continues on until it exhausts itself. Vichara, like the ringing of a gong. Eventually, something else will pop up. And once the person is able to subdue that, then they experience this internal joyfulness. But we don't want to even attach to the internal joyfulness. We let that dissolve, and then we experience this tranquil bliss, this happiness that's even deeper than the joyfulness. But we don't want to attach to that either. We eventually want to get to a state of equanimity, single-mindedness, and these are the factors that help us leave the desire realm in which we live and go into the higher form realm. And in the different 4 form realms, the person dissolves their thinking, they dissolve their attachment to the joyfulness and even to the happiness, and then even to the equanimity, and they can go into even higher states of being at that point. But this usually requires a person to do long retreats for months, maybe years, become ordained. It's very helpful, less distraction. So if this is just something I just want to share. And then finally, wisdom, right view. This is a chart of the 12 links of interdependent origination. This is several talks in and of itself. So this is how our karmic conditions arise and cease, starting with ignorance, volitional formations, and consciousness, and name and form of the 5 aggregates. When we become aware of this information that we're getting from our senses, how we make contact with it, the feelings that they cause, then the cravings that result, clinging, wanting to hold on to it, that brings the next moment of existence. And this is part of the cycle of birth, aging, and death. So this is a very deep and detailed teaching. So the Buddha had a number of very profound teachings about the 4 noble truths, eightfold path, the 5 aggregates, and this interdependent origination. This is one of the foundational teachings. Again, it goes in a cycle as well. And each one can be unfolded so that we see that there are many different aspects to each one. Right intention, or sometimes right thinking, leads us to the right intention toward no ill will, or being kind, not being harmful, being benevolent, being helpful to people and to ourselves. Renunciation, 2 levels of that. One in the monastic tradition, the monastic vows, following that monastic path, but even the layperson can practice a level of renunciation by renouncing the greed, anger, and wrong views related to selfishness. And they can overcome that. If my wife wants to criticize me, she can always say, "You're being selfish." And if I defend that, well, then I'm definitely being selfish. So better just to do what she asks. Because still, until the person becomes enlightened, we still have that selfishness, a little bit, sometimes a lot. Being self-oriented, not easy to give that up. So this is my talk for today. I hope that this is beneficial. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings never be separated from the altruistic joy which is free from suffering. And may all beings dwell in the great equanimity which is free from attachment, aversion, and ignorance.